Bulletcast for life.
Welcome everybody to another edition of Under the Radar. My name is Brandon, and on today's episode we will be going over the latest episode of NXT television, as well as some little tidbits of news. Not a whole lot of news to talk about. We talked about the big news of AEW officially becoming a thing, the rally on the Bulletcast on Wednesday. If you have not listened to that episode, go check it out, listen to it, download it, or watch it on YouTube if you would like to. But first, we're going to get into, I believe, is like the biggest news of the day thus far on Friday, and it is the announcement of the WWE UK Performance Center being introduced today. I believe it is in somewhere in London. I do not know, but it's a smaller performance center compared to the one down in Orlando, Florida. Around 30 people are there as students or trainees, whatever exactly you would like to call them. And there's videos, and there's, Charlotte, Flair, and Finn Balor were there kind of talking about what the U.S. Performance Center did to them and how the U.K. Performance Center can help these wrestlers become WWE superstars. But this is just another step forward of stuff we've been talking about in the past of WWE trying to expand their global reach, or the global localization, which is what Triple H calls it, which doesn't really make any sense, but it's kind of a oxymoron, I think. But anyways, a bunch of wrestling or news outlets released or toured the facility. I seen stuff on Cultaholic, Wrestle Talk, and there's probably some other stuff there as well. It looks like a nice little facility. I haven't seen the exact outside of it, but the inside looks beautiful. And with this kind of being the next step of WWE trying to take over the European wrestling scene, I've talked about it in the past. I'm a little skeptical about WWE taking, they want to work together with all these different promotions, but yet on the other hand, there's news coming out about the UK wrestlers having like very strict contracts, can't really wrestle on promotions unless they're like, these approved ones, or they can't like wrestle on television or pay-per-views for other promotions. So, I don't know exactly how to feel about this. Yes, it's a big step for WWE to announce this. And NXT UK has their first takeover special tomorrow from Blackpool. I assume I will watch it eventually. I'm probably not going to watch it live on Saturday with all the football and other stuff going on Saturday. But eventually I will get around to it. Maybe I will review it on the next edition of Under the Radar, because once again, don't exactly know what the schedule will be for the Bulletcast. Don't know if I'll be... Maybe one of these days we'll finally return to our regularly scheduled program every Tuesday. But anyways, some other news. Apparently there is some rumored WrestleMania matches that might be in place, maybe in pencil right now. And the main event that we kind of have been talking about for a long time, it seems like it's almost official now, of Ronda Rousey versus Becky Lynch versus Charlotte Flair. Not exactly sure for what title, double title, just Ronda's title, maybe just Becky's title if she wins at SmackDown. But, we've talked about this for a long time. It seems as though that's the direction they were going. Me personally, I would have gone with just a Becky versus Ronda match. I'm not a big proponent of triple threat matches, multi-women, multi-person matches, just because I feel like it takes away from the heat. If you take the same amount of heat, you can put it into two people, but if you take that heat, you have to spread it across three different people sometimes. More isn't always better. And in this case, I'm not the biggest fan of Charlotte, to be honest. Like, I understand she's good, she has a legacy behind her, but I just feel like Becky Lynch is the far hotter act right now, and just her going up against Ronda could be such, that's like what everybody wants to see. I don't know how just entering Charlotte in the situation. Yes, they did the angle at TLC to where Ronda cost Becky and Charlotte the championship, but I feel like they're kind of manufacturing this whole Charlotte-Ronda feud. Originally, it was supposed to be Charlotte versus Ronda at WrestleMania, but then that was after or before SummerSlam or whatever, when Becky started getting super over. And that's when WWE needs to be able to adjust on the fly and just be like, look, I know Charlotte was the person we're going to go with, but let's be honest, Becky Lynch is the better option. It might not have been our pick. Maybe we don't understand why she's getting so over, but she's the most over person. Maybe not in the company. I think she's kind of fallen off the last couple weeks to months. I mean, compared to what she was after that invasion angle that they did where she was bloodied up, that might have been like the height of her hotness or heat, whatever, her overness. But I feel like she's kind of tapered off a little bit, but I still think she's super over. I think more over than Charlotte, and I don't exactly know. I mean, we talked about this on the Bulletcast. I don't know where you go from here. You have Becky against Asuka. You have Charlotte seemingly in the Royal Rumble match. So you just have do you have Charlotte win and challenge both of them? Do you have her there's just so many different ways, and with Ronda being on one brand and two of them being on the other brand, it kind of, and especially with Ronda being the champion, it's kind of hard to see where they go with this. Does Ronda beat Sasha, and then Ronda says I don't know, I don't have any other competitors that I feel are worthy for me to challenge at WrestleMania, so I'm going to go over to SmackDown and face Becky and Charlotte. There's a whole bunch of different ways you can go with that, but I'm much more of a proponent of going with Becky versus Ronda. I think, yes, Charlotte will get the rub of being in the first ever women's main event of WrestleMania, but you shouldn't be thinking in terms like that, this is the first ever thing we're doing, so let's get as many people in here as possible so they can all say they're a part of it. But if everybody was a part of the first ever thing, then it doesn't make it that doesn't make it special as much as it could have been if it was just 1-versus-1 Becky versus Ronda, and it was a super hot angle and it was super over. Doesn't mean that this triple threat match can't get super over and be, one of the hottest WrestleMania main events of all time. But I feel Becky versus Charlotte, or Becky versus Ronda rather, would be a much better deal. Another one that's kind of an interesting proposition for WrestleMania is, apparently there's rumors out there that Lars Sullivan will take on John Cena at WrestleMania, and this one is kind of interesting, kind of out of nowhere. I kind of believe that Lars Sullivan was set for a big push just because he's a big dude. I saw him at a NXT house show in San Jose. I didn't even know who he was. He came out, had a squash match. I thought he was phenomenal. He showed great fire, and ever since watching him on NXT TV, I've kind of gotten to like him a little bit more. Yes, he might not be the best wrestler in the world, but for who he is, he's a little. I don't exactly know how big he is compared to Braun Strowman. I would say he might be a little shorter than Braun Strowman, but he's similar body type. Maybe Braun or Lars is kind of bigger in terms of upper body, kind of But we're not gonna divulge into Lars Sullivan's body physique. But anyways, apparently he was set to debut in a dark match this week, and I guess he had some sort of anxiety attack. So hopefully Lars Sullivan can get better. Obviously, mental issues and stuff like that, especially when it comes to wrestling and going out there in front of a big crowd. This was his first ever WWE match, I believe. So him having an anxiety attack shouldn't be a hindrance to him. Hopefully he can. I don't know. I'm not trying to be insensitive or anything, but just trying to see if he can get over that. Because if this starts to happen, if this starts to happen often, I mean, obviously he was in NXT. He wrestled at takeovers. He's wrestled in front of big crowds like this. So, it might just be a one-time thing. It kind of all hit him at once. That okay, he's going to wrestle in WWE, and now that he can kind of get everything under control. Kind of get everything, because what happens if this were to happen at WrestleMania and he suffered an anxiety attack? I mean, that would be, I'm not going to say catastrophic, but that would just be something very something we've never seen before. Just someone scheduled to have a match at WrestleMania or a match in general, and then the match gets canceled because of an anxiety attack or some sort of mental issue that is going on with him. So, but taking aside from that, just Lars Sullivan set to be getting a big push. It looks like facing John Cena at WrestleMania, kind of similar to Bray Wyatt going up against John Cena at WrestleMania 30. Just a new act coming in, getting a big push out of the gate. Obviously, John Cena beat Bray Wyatt at 30. I would say John Cena would lose to Lars Sullivan just because he hasn't been on the main roster yet, so he's gonna have to get pushed fast in a short amount of time. There are two pay-per-views in between Royal Rumble and WrestleMania, so you can use those two matches to kind of, or use those two pay-per-views to be maybe squash matches for him, or kind of lower level baby faces. He can get into a feud with No Way Jose, or I don't know, maybe Zack Ryder comes out of the cave he's been living in and finally gets some television time. But he was on television. He was breaking up that Seth Rollins Bobby Lashley pull apart brawl. But it's going to be interesting to see how they get there. Does Lars Sullivan make his debut at the Royal Rumble? It seems as though the spots are kind of filling up. I think there's about 20 people already announced for the Royal Rumble, so only 10 spots remain. They keep running those same vignettes of all the different wrestlers set to debut in WWE, like what's been like 4 or 5 weeks now. It's just been getting kind of tiresome. Like, I know I watch it usually on delay, so I just fast forward it to begin with, but it's just kind of weird how they keep showing this, like, the same exact video package for such a long period of time. And it's not like these wrestlers have like no experience. You don't have any tape on them. You can switch it up. Like, you can have different things and kind of even have promos of them just doing something. Just switch it up here, WWE. Trying to get us a little bit more excited. Like, okay, you can do it the first 2 weeks, but then after that, we know who these people are for the most part. Can you give us something else to talk about? So some AEW news, just some little bit of news. It seems as though not like concrete evidence, but I guess like Dave Meltzer kind of hinted at, maybe AJ Styles' contract is coming up to an end and AEW might be going for a big push to sign AJ Styles. I mean, I don't see that happening. AJ Styles has such a good gig in WWE. I think maybe if the Khans and the AEW group are really serious of getting AJ Styles to AEW, I think the only way you can do that is just giving him comparable money to what he's making in WWE, so I don't know, $1.5 million or whatever he's making, but then having less dates when AJ Styles has his kids. He's getting up there in age, he's in his early 40s, so he can't do this forever. So this can probably be AJ Styles' last big full-time contract. And if AEW is serious, and I talked about this on the Bulletcast, is where is AEW going to get their big stars? They have Jericho, who is currently their biggest star, but Jericho's in his late 40s. You're not going to have him be the centerpiece act for a long period of time. Maybe he can have a little run with the title. But Hangman Page seems to be, the young guy that seems as though he's primed to be one of the top people in this company. With Cody and the Young Bucks, you kind of have to walk a fine line there just because they are management. They're in top positions. And you don't want to get heat from the fan base of maybe getting like a Triple H type rep or Dusty Rhodes or, other bookers in the past who were also wrestlers who would put themselves on top, and maybe putting themselves on top just because, I mean, you can't trust anyone except for yourself. So might as well put yourself on top and book yourself to win and do all this other stuff. So I think Cody can flirt with the main event, every now and then go up and down, but I don't think I think personally Cody as a talent maybe isn't the best to be, a top-fledged guy. I think if he's a heel, I think Cody can be a good heel top guy. But Hangman Page is one. Obviously Kenny Omega's out there. Kenny Omega can be a good top guy for AEW. But, looking out there on the indie scene, WWE is taking up a lot of people off the indie scene. Like I would have said if this was a couple months ago, Matt Riddle I'm really high on. Keith Lee, I don't exactly know too much about him, so I wouldn't have said pick him up, but I mean, oh my god, I am completely blanking on my favorite wrestler in Impact Wrestling history right now. Oh my god, I'm a terrible wrestling fan, but anyways, there's just so many top guys, or not too many top guys, I would say, that AEW can scoop up. And also Chris Jericho hinted on not Busted Open Radio, some sort of radio station talking about maybe there is a big time TV deal coming down the pipeline for AEW. That's important for them to get a big TV deal to be serious, but I mean, a big TV deal isn't gonna bring in a whole bunch of new fans that have never seen wrestling before. If they see commercials on TNT or TBS or whatever, that doesn't mean anything. You need to have top stars. You need to have a hot product. And right now, it's going to be very, very interesting to see what AEW does. I think their first few shows can be like maybe not gimmick shows, but like kind of what All In was, just a lot of indie stars, maybe not a lot of storylines involved. Yes, they have be in the elite stuff where you can incorporate some of the top matches with stories, but for the most part, a lot of those matches were just kind of thrown in there. Not a lot of storyline behind it. There were good matches. It was a great show. I thought personally, All In was my show of the year for 2018, but for different reasons. But so AEW is going to be a very interesting story coming up for the next few months. I've already said that I'm going to be going to Double or Nothing in Las Vegas. I don't know what Philip is going to be doing, but I think for sure I will be going, and it's going to be a very fun time in Vegas. It's going to be like a little WrestleMania, nice start to summer. And shout out to Conrad Thompson with StarCast and all the different travel discounts that he's had. So shout out to Conrad, you the man. So next up, let's talk about the latest episode of NXT TV. This took place on January 9th from Full Sail University. And they start off with Johnny Gargano coming out in some street clothes, and he wished everyone a happy new year. Kind of Johnny Gargano seeming as though he's a babyface, but some people getting behind him, some people not buying it. And Mauro Ranallo said something about how he said something about like his new year, and he said that he's gonna die trying, and he spelled die DIY. And the crowd was chanting DIY, and Johnny kind of pushed, didn't really acknowledge it, kind of pushed it to the side, like, not going to really happen. So he ended up kind of challenging Ricochet, which is what Tommaso Ciampa said he should do, that DIY can have both championships, but Johnny Gargano said it had nothing to do with Tommaso Ciampa. This was his idea. And then Ricochet comes out just in his suit, and they kind of go back and forth. I really liked how Ricochet carried himself. He didn't seem fake. He kind of talked how a normal 20-something-year-old guy would talk, just kind of saying, you don't want the smoke, homeboy. If you want to come get it, just random stuff like that just makes Ricochet and kind of NXT in general kind of seeming a little more realistic than what WWE is with all their different corporate speak. Yes, there is corporate speak in NXT. You can see with Sports Entertainer and NXT Universe and all the other stuff. But there's some little things that give you hope about what Triple H will do with WWE if and when he takes it over. So then Tommaso Ciampa comes out and Aleister Black comes out. They get into like a big old brawl between not all four of them, but the two guys kind of separate and they do their own thing. And Johnny Gargano ends up kicking Ricochet, leaving him laying, and basically sets up the match at Takeover Phoenix, with Johnny Gargano taking on Ricochet. So not official yet, but it definitely seems as though that will be where they're going. The crowd reaction was kind of all over the place. They were cheering Johnny, but then they were booing. Some of them were booing. I think with Johnny, as I said, he kind of came out as a babyface, but then he kicked Ricochet in the end. So they're gonna have to do some things leading up to Takeover to kind of cement that Gargano is a heel, even though I thought they kind of did that the last few months with what he's been doing with Aleister Black. But Ciampa's a good heel, and if you can get Ciampa and Gargano together in the long haul, yes, initially there is going to be that massive pop of DIY getting back together, but I think in the long term, people will get over that. And with Ciampa maybe taking the lead and kind of pushing Gargano to the side, making him like his little brother, maybe eventually you can get Johnny Gargano to turn babyface on Tommaso Ciampa, maybe reignite that feud, and maybe something coming up at War Games or something at the end of the year to where Johnny Gargano can end the year on a high note and be the top babyface that we all thought he was going to be after the WrestleMania takeover last year. So a tweet from William Regal announced that the War Raiders will take on the Undisputed Era for the NXT Tag Team Championships. Have not seen the War Raiders much on NXT TV because they've been suffering injuries. I think it's Rowe. I honestly can't remember which one of them had much more of the injuries, but obviously War Games, a tough match for anybody, and they were kind of banged up. So we haven't really seen them on NXT television until, well, we'll talk about that in a little bit. So our first match is Nikki Cross going up against Bianca Belair, another Another match from these two, and I thought it was a really good match between these two. 10 minutes and 44 seconds, Bianca Belair ends up getting the victory. Bianca Belair, as I said in the past, kind of one of those figures in wrestling that is not really defined properly as a heel or a babyface, kind of what Johnny Gargano is, I would say, to a degree, but Bianca Belair comes out, she has the swagger, and she was kind of getting cheered, but, Nikki Cross is popular, one of the most popular women in NXT. So obviously Nikki is going to have her fair share of supporters. Belair has her supporters as well. And Nikki kind of had Bianca on the ropes. They did a callback to their other match where they got a double disqualification or double count out to where Nikki Cross was on Bianca Belair's back, and then Belair kind of, fell back onto the ramp, and they were both down. They teased the double count out, but both of them came in at 9. What is it? The finish came when Nikki Cross jumped off the top rope, but Belair ducked, and she was able to get her up on her shoulders and hit the KOD for the victory. So, I believe this is just another one of those wrestlers that are getting teased to go on to WWE, jobbing on the way out, as was the norm for territories for forever. So, no shock here that Nikki Cross does the job to Bianca Belair, getting the title match going up against Shayna Baszler coming up in a few weeks. I don't know if I'd say this was like the best singles match Belair's had, but you can definitely see Belair improving exponentially in the ring compared to what she was in that first Mae Young Classic tour. She was really green. You saw she had the athletic ability, but I think now she's kind of putting everything together. She has the charisma. She always had the charisma, but now she's having the wrestling ability to back it up. And I think the feud wasn't as hot as it could have been, just because they kind of went back and forth with it. It kind of wasn't. It was hot for. I wouldn't say hot, but they pushed it for a little bit. And then they just kind of threw the match out there with no real build. So it wasn't as big of a match as it could have been, but I think it was a good win on the trail. I don't even know what the hell I'm saying. But Bianca Belair gets a nice victory on the way to takeover Phoenix. So next up, we have a Street Profits segment. They're outside. Angelo Dawkins is beatboxing and Montez Ford is rapping. They talk about how 2009 will be the year for the Street Profits. I thought it was a good vignette. It was fine for what it was, and they said that the return of their talk show, I forgot what the name was. Some in the streets, or Street Talk, I think that's what it's called. But I thought it was a good segment from these guys. They're over. They don't exactly get the wins, so you can kind of equate them to an Enzo and Cass. But they're maybe, I wouldn't even say they're as over or as a big of a deal in the tag team division as Enzo and Cass was back in their day. Enzo and Cass were kind of those top baby faces, but they never really got the win, kind of like how the Street Profits are. But they said 2019 might be the year. Maybe they're right. So. Next up, we have the European Union, a debuting act on NXT television. They're a tag team over in NXT UK. We have Fabian Eichner and Marcel Barthel going up against a jobber team of Huntsman and Watts. Just the European Union gets over and they win in 4 minutes 36 seconds. It was a good match all the way around. Just kind of teasing or just kind of showing who the European Union is. I assume they're heels. They're just in all black trunks. Nothing real fancy to them. The jobbers were smaller guys, so the Union was able to kind of do impressive power moves. They're not big dudes by any sense, 220 to 240, not exactly really big dudes like a Lars Sullivan or a Dijakovic, but they're good. It was a fine match for what it was, and it gets maybe not excited, but it kind of shows that they go up against Birch and Lorcan, that these two guys can have these four guys rather could have a really good match. We go to Kathy Kelly in the parking lot, and she talked about the Black and Ciampa feud that happened earlier, and she saw Ricochet was leaving the arena, and she hurried up to go get a word from Ricochet, and Ricochet was furious. He talked about how he gave Gargano a respectful opportunity, and Gargano threw the respect away by hitting a super kick on him, and he vowed that regardless of what Gargano gets a title shot or not, that he's going to take out Johnny Gargano. So once again, just kind of a simple backstage promo from Ricochet. I thought it was good, setting up the eventual match between Gargano and or Gargano and Ricochet. So, I mean, just simple stuff here, but this is just what NXT does. They do simple things, makes sense, and gets you excited for what's coming on down the line. So they hit a recap of Cassius Ohno versus Matt Riddle last week, which was basically the only new thing that happened on last week's episode of NXT, and then we go to an interview with Keith Lee backstage, and he challenged Ohno to a match next week and promised that Ohno is going to learn a lesson of respect, and he will bask in his glory. I thought the promo honestly was really good from Keith Lee up until he hit that bask in his glory line. I'm not a fan of the gimmick itself. It's kind of reminiscent of the glorious gimmick from Bobby Roode, which I have never really been a fan of. And I thought Keith Lee was showing good intensity, a good promo, and then just all of a sudden he just kind of hits the switch and he hits his catchphrase and was like, oh yeah, you gotta hit the catchphrase to end off the promo to let everyone know we're done. Which is kind of the things I was talking about earlier, which you see realism with NXT and you see some good things from NXT, but then you see some other WWE-isms like this where you especially with like the Bobby Roode promos we see all the time, he always ends with glorious. And I don't know if this is exactly the character you want Keith Lee to have. I mean, I don't understand. I mean, I didn't see him that much on the indie scene, so I don't exactly know how relatable or how similar this is to his gimmick down in the independent scene, but I'm not the big fan of the whole basket of glory thing. Like, it's fine for what it is, but it's not exactly what I would do. So, Ohno versus Keith Lee next week should be a good match. And now we have the main event with EC3 going up against Adam Cole, accompanied by all members of Undisputed Era, Kyle O'Reilly, Roderick Strong, Bobby Fish. They kind of do a little recap of, all the different things that EC3 has gone on up against the Undisputed Era. And it was a good match, but in the end, the numbers game took advantage of EC3 with O'Reilly, Strong, and Fish kind of distracting the referee. And then some of the other guys kind of get on EC3, but EC3 is able to stave him off. But Adam Cole is able to take him down, hit a last shot for the victory. So Adam Cole wins in 7 minutes and 52 seconds. The match itself was aight. It wasn't great by any means. Maybe EC3 going out on a whimper. I mean, they protected him. He didn't lose clean to Adam Cole, but EC3 coming into NXT, I always thought he was much more of a fit on the WWE roster than on NXT. But even then, when he was in TNA and he was doing stuff there, I was never like the big fan. Like, character-wise, he's a great character. But when it comes to in-ring, he just hasn't really shown to me personally that he can get me excited for an EC3 match. I mean, the Velveteen Dream match he had at whatever takeover it was honestly Velveteen Dream his probably worst match. Definitely of his takeover career, but maybe in his career in NXT in general. And with EC3 going to the main roster, I kind of like Lars Sullivan. I can see him getting a big push out of the gate. It's kind of funny how you have a TNA character, a literal Carter, is now going to be going to WWE, and I would love for EC3 just to drop like little subtle hints of that, just like thanking his Aunt Dixie and other things like that. But EC3, it seems as though this is his last match in NXT, and if it is, I mean, what is there really to say about EC3's NXT career? I mean, he didn't really do a whole lot. He had the feud with Velveteen Dream. He had the ladder match. I believe he was in the ladder match for the North American Championship, but for the most part, he didn't really do a whole lot in NXT. Which I wouldn't even know if I would even say if that's a shame, just because, as I said, I don't think EC3 really was a good fit in NXT regardless, and I'm not a big fan of him in general. So it's going to be interesting to see where he goes with WWE. Does he go to Raw or SmackDown? I don't know. I mean, if Daniel Bryan is the champion going forward, do you put him on SmackDown? Because it seems as though SmackDown is kind of hurting for credible babyfaces at the moment. So if you do get this title on AJ Styles, I mean, EC3 is a fine champion or a fine guy to go up against AJ Styles. I don't think he's going to win the championship right away. But with him going over to Raw is the number one brand. Maybe he can go up against Seth Rollins, but then you have Bobby. See, that I don't exactly know where you go from here. EC3 is technically a babyface on NXT, but I just see him fitting more in that heel role. So do you? Because if you put EC3 on SmackDown, and let's say Daniel Bryan holds the championship past WrestleMania, if EC3 goes up against Daniel Bryan for the WWE Championship, I'd say regardless of what city you're in, it can be in Poughkeepsie or it can be in Chicago. I think Daniel Bryan is gonna be cheered like exponentially more than what EC3 would be cheered in that match. So EC3 going to WWE, you know, EC3 and Lars Sullivan, the two singles guys getting called up, they're two different characters, two different ways you can book them. So it's gonna be interesting to see where they go. So I said this was maybe going to be a shorter one, and of course it wasn't. 30 minutes in length. Thank you guys very much for listening, and until next time, till the Bulletcast, whenever that takes place, maybe it'll be Wednesday, maybe it'll be Friday, who exactly knows. But as always, thank y'all very much. I appreciate every single one of you guys for listening, and until next time, goodbye and good night. Bang.